I'm Amy Syed.
I'm Sean Collins.
And this is Numbers and Narratives.
So, Rachel, thanks so much for coming on. Can you give us a very, very brief intro as to who you are, what you do, and a little bit of your background?
Thanks for having me. I'm Rachel Smith. I've been consulting now for a little over a year with a company that I'm a business partner at, Rex Collective. I've been, like I said, in that role for a little over a year. Prior to that, I was in-house for about 12 years, started out my career in technology with a data and analytics background. Spent about half my career in those roles supporting multiple brands, primarily D2C e-com businesses, but some with storefronts, and then pivoted over into a marketing role. And most recently in-house, I'd been running digital marketing channels, everything from email, website, growth, everything from paid media to continuing to run customer analytics and data platform decisions. So yeah, excited to talk.
Super excited about this one. Rachel, in the size of a tweet or a tweet thread, what did we talk about today?
Yeah, we talked about unifying the customer data into one universe and how to personalize the customer experience to make more money.
That's awesome. I guess the place where my brain goes first, seeing that you have a data and a marketing background. Let's say that, and I think this is something that you've actually done in your career, which is new, like a big brand launches a new sub-brand, or you're sort of involved in, the creation of something new. From a data perspective, what are kind of the first steps that a marketer should take in order to kind of like get the lay of the land, get everything set up for success, get everything set up for all the things that you're going to talk about in this episode?
It's a very important question. And if you're lucky enough to think about that when you're starting something from scratch, you're in a good spot. I think a lot of brands don't think about the data landscape when they are launching something net new, and then often find themselves in a bit of a cleanup scenario. So some of the basics that I would absolutely take into account are a data warehouse to actually store everything. Something as simple as a Google BigQuery. It doesn't cost a lot of money. There's other options, but getting somebody to set that up, it could be an outside agency or an internal owner, but actually having a place to house your data that makes you a little bit less reliant, so that the only place you're running reports isn't just Shopify. You can go ahead and create like a 360 lens of your customer eventually. So that's just kind of getting the basic architecture construct set up. And then another big one that I see brands having to do massive cleanup exercises on after the fact is just some basic digital analytics UTM parameter setting, some naming conventions set up such that you have a strong point of view on what you want to look at from a reporting perspective on your marketing channel performance, and coming up with those naming conventions and hierarchies and implementing them. It's very simple. There's probably some really easy help docs online to kind of guide that exercise, but that should start from the beginning. Otherwise, you will have to do a lot of cleanup, and ultimately that'll help you get a sense of year-over-year growth by channel in a really tight way. So those are the two that I would start with. There's a lot of additional.
One follow-up there is just to make this crystal clear, for the folks that, we've talked about, for the folks that like we're talking to, can you just give a brief explainer as to what a data warehouse is? And when you say like pull in data, how is it, what is the difference between just going into Shopify versus like putting data into something like a BigQuery or a Snowflake? What is the primary benefit?
Yeah, so this is going to be probably a little intimidating to people. Like you mentioned, they don't even know what a data warehouse is. It doesn't need to be. It's pretty simple. I know we've talked about tools like Fivetran, but basically, if you're pulling out of Shopify, if you're pulling out of your ads manager, or you're, let's say, using a Klaviyo environment or an Attentive environment, a lot of that houses some customer data in the tool, but those are third-party tools, so you really don't own that data. And being able to stitch that together requires that it's kind of housed in one location to be able to inform future insights about what your single customer is doing across channels. So putting it in a data warehouse, and a data warehouse is basically just a tool that allows you to capture data in maybe tables, think like, lots and lots of Excels or things like that, that you can relate to each other and say, this customer is doing this over here and they're doing this over here. Of course, you want somebody that's probably implemented this before to help you set it up. But you mentioned tools like Snowflake and BigQuery, and there's Amazon Redshift. And depending on the size of the business, will determine which tool they go with. But like I said from the beginning, it does not need to be intimidating. Google BigQuery is one that I've used with tiny itty bitty brands that is very inexpensive and can be set up in no time. And they offer like free trials. There's lots of ways to learn it. So I think the intimidation factor is overwhelming to a lot of brands, but it definitely doesn't need to be.
Another thing that's great about BigQuery is that it does have native integrations with things like Google Analytics and your Google Ads and stuff like that to make it so easy to get everything housed together. And like Rachel's saying, this will let you will remove the requirement to be in 7 different tools to start to do exports and then like VLOOKUPs and pivot tables everywhere, and you can just have it in one place, and it makes a little bit of work up front does go a long way.
Yeah. Okay. So the benefits are just, you get to reconcile data from across a bunch of different platforms. Like if you want to see, when a customer clicked on a link from an attentive message, a message sent by attentive, and did they end up coming back and actually purchasing on Shopify? Obviously, some of this stuff you can get from the tools themselves, but there are tons and tons of different reports that you have to pull, aggregations that you have to do if you do it manually across the different SaaS platforms, and BigQuery will just put it all in one place. That's super, super useful. I guess, yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, I guess one thing to add to that too is the fact that I know, like you said, Sean, there's one-click integrations to send your data often to these tools too. So once you set it up and you're in Shopify, you could kind of find the settings and say integrate with, and then it automatically kind of sets up that data movement. So it's not some giant task, or you could use an alternate tool such as a Fivetran to kind of push it over.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I wonder, as you've worked with brands across sizes, are there trends that you've seen in their data architecture that people are usually missing on, whether it's not having consistent UTMs or not using UTMs at all? I know when I was agency side, one that I saw a lot was people installed Google Analytics but never really messed with the settings, and so they're just going off of like the default settings of everything, and that was not capturing stuff properly. Like what are some of the big pitfalls you've seen that have been kind of consistent across company sizes?
I think that's absolutely one that I've seen as well, the GA implementation. So they've set it up and then they might have like set it and forgot it, or maybe they were familiar with Universal Analytics and now that it's GA4, they're like, I don't know my way around that platform. But that default channel grouping is very important. It's super practical, super easy. But setting that up from the get-go is often something that I've seen has not happened. And then in that case, to your point, what then becomes the scenario that I see, either some brands that are a little bit bigger have this solution in place, and some brands that are right at that point where they could use it. It depends on their revenue, how big they are, how big of a team they have. But everybody wants better insights. And what I've seen them implement is kind of a mapping table, if you will, internally to basically clean up a lot of the UTMs and like the channel groupings that were incorrect to start. And then kind of leverage that as like an ongoing process to look at, like I said, their channel growth year over year, their everything down to even the if you're looking at emails and you want to understand flow performance versus campaign performance over time, you can set those things up. But if you haven't constructed it like that year over year, you're going to have to do that cleanup. And so you can have some of those mapping tables. And at the bigger companies, they have more robust like ETL processes and things that are cleaning up their data so that they can look at them and visualize them in a really nice suite of reports. But on the smaller side, which is, I think, the vast majority of what I'm seeing on the consulting side, because the majority of my in-house time was at fairly large brands like Nordstrom, Urban Outfitters, JP Morgan. So obviously they had big teams to do a lot of that work. But in the consulting land, and MB and I have seen this for sure, a lot of smaller businesses, maybe they haven't scaled out to that level yet. They are in that place where data's messy. They don't have the full picture. They're doing a lot of manual reporting out of 10 different tools to arrive at one view that should be pretty simple, but unfortunately takes a lot of time off their team to create those manual reports.
Yeah, those manual UTMs are super, super tough just because like what ends up happening is like you can accidentally, type lowercase LinkedIn instead of uppercase LinkedIn, and suddenly you have to add another bracket thing. Like you have to add like another row. And one of the things that we're trying to do is get like an LLM to go through, read all of them and say, hey, like these are your possible outputs, right? Like this is like all of the possible outputs that you have based on, the way the campaign is written. Here are some examples, and then train sort of a model to try to go through and actually like tag them. Cause it's such a huge problem.
Yeah.
Like every single brand, because there are so many people launching different campaigns, it's really tricky to get everyone to agree to like a universal mapping system. You make one mistake and suddenly it's like, oh crud, like we have to fix the whole thing again. So yeah, that's super messy.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I've seen rules built out in a table, and then you can change your mind and it'll automatically go back and restate historically. So you don't have to manually adjust everything.
And that's the other, if you're using Google Analytics, then it does require you to do a lot of setup. But if you are piping everything into BigQuery, you can set filters on GA that will automatically, it's just a regex rule that will just automatically put everything in lowercase or automatically group anything that has a Google prefix or something like that. And so there's simple things you can do on the GA side that will then have everything very clean when it gets to your database, which is great.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Switching focus for a sec here, Rachel, I'm a little curious. You've got the data, right? It's piping into BigQuery. It's all in one place. You've got some, basic reporting set up. What are some other things? What are some other sort of uses of the data, common uses of the data, maybe for personalization's perspective or to understand customer behavior? What are some of the goals that you are trying to, actually, it's probably a bad way of putting it. What are some outcomes that you're trying to achieve, and how are you using the data to do that? Like, what are some common sort of tactics, common analyses, common models that you're running?
I think what maybe the right answer to the question from my perspective is that I'm always trying to get a sense of a few aspects of any business. Let's take any business that sells products online, like e-com, maybe fashion apparel as an example, because that's a lot of what I work on. I want to get a sense of their core customer at a high level. So that's like one packet of insights that I would like to derive. And then I want to get a really clear sense of, for the customers and the customer segments, what products are resonating for them. So it's kind of an overlay of not just product performance, but how different customer groups are interacting with products. And the types of insights I'm looking for there are things like, we often might call it like a market basket analysis, or what are the like items that are showing up in an order to kind of indicate these types of customer groups. Of course, you have your top products. You have all these things that are out of the box in Shopify. They give you reports that are pretty easy. But in that BigQuery environment, you can start to tell really robust stories about your customers that are a little bit harder to arrive at in the platforms by overlapping like these types of segments, recently shopped users, or these types of customers who really appreciate these attributes of products like lacy, romantic versus cool and trendy, and start to get a sense of customers' behaviors. And that really is helpful for modeling and planning out future for what will perform for those specific customer groups. So that's a big one. Like you said, personalization. So what I've primarily talked about is insights, and that can help inform planning. But there's also very tangible revenue driving opportunities once you have some of that data in an ecosystem where you can send it back into things like your paid ads as well as your emails and have really great personalized grids based on items that they've interacted with and pulling similar products that they may also like. And there's a whole suite of product recommendations that are very interesting to test. And, that's a whole ecosystem in and of itself to talk about.
Just very quickly, I guess, any specific case studies here, like anyone that you've done this for? Maybe you don't need to mention the brand if you can't, but anything where you've seen this work to great success, personalization, segmentation, any specific examples of what a company's done that's proven to work?
For sure. So I've seen a lot of different implementations, and thankfully you see even tools like Attentive and Klaviyo, and certainly Salesforce Marketing Cloud. They have Einstein. There's AI sorts of aspects of tools that are rolling out or have. And let's say Klaviyo, for example, if you're a small brand and you don't have this data warehouse, you don't have a data scientist, this intimidates you, you don't want to, bring somebody on board, you can utilize the things in the tool themselves that are showcasing some of the models that they pre-create to add on product grids. They have the best sellers automatically loaded. They have most interacted with across the site. They even have some more robust logic now that you can implement to say items that this customer has shopped and similar to. Now, what's in that logic, they don't expose, so you don't know. And so there's maybe only certain 3 or 4 that I've seen in the Klaviyo environment, but they keep adding to it. So that's one aspect of, for a smaller brand, they could just do some of those third-party implementations. And then for the larger brands where they can really invest, there's some really cool stuff that you could do. I've seen some data science teams like attribute products visually using like visual AI and produce the attributes and kind of group those together to say this, on the PDP page, for example, powering a you may also like, that's really representative of what that visual product looks like, and pulling in very similar but different products to convey that. So there's all sorts of maturity with that, but and it depends on, again, the size of the brand and how many resources that they can bring on.
Yeah, that's super cool, because I think one of the places a lot of brands miss is those recommendation pieces where they will just go with like, these are our top sellers, and so everyone's going to see these, and they miss on things. You could use tags if you don't want to use don't have the resources to do it visually, and so I wear a lot of flannels. Tag all your shirts that are flannels, and like I'd rather see that than another similarly colored long sleeve shirt. And so just it's pretty simple, and like you're saying in Klaviyo, right? You can create custom. Last time I played with Klaviyo, which has been a couple of years now, you could create custom subcatalogs, right? And so you could group your products and say, well, these are our high ROI products, or commonly first purchased products, and so you could have that for people who haven't purchased, or you could have a group of like easy common add-ons to increase that basket size in an abandoned cart or a post-purchase email, right? So like, are there any of those kind of things that you've done, or any headaches you've had to try and get people out of, and just using kind of the generic basic recommendations?
Oh boy, the headaches one isn't as fun, so I'll answer the other one first. Some of the most exciting implementations I've seen, there, I'm not going to name some brands, but there's a child apparel brand that has a really powerful in-cart you may also like, and it's kind of a carousel that's definitely powered by similar products, and I'm not exactly sure how they arrive at that model, but that's one just implementation I've seen that's been definitely a huge upsell for me as a consumer. So I didn't myself work on that one. One that I did work on was through the email channel. And I think this is a more creative led brand that really cares about the aesthetics. And this is sometimes challenging for slapping on a product grid. A lot of brands are like, well, I don't want to show these random products compared to this beautiful email campaign that has a strong point of view with merchandising. I'm not okay with that. So what I've seen this brand do is apply what you just said, like the categories overlaid in terms of, okay, this is still a dress email, summer dresses email, but the summer dresses that I receive, Rachel, are going to look very, very different than my friend Natalie, who's going to receive a totally different grid of summer dresses, but it's all still summer dresses. And it all looks good with the campaign imagery that falls right above it. And I guess to the other point that you brought up, I've also worked at very, very large retailers that have implemented those kind of basic best sellers on every single email. And it could be an email about, their big sale, or it could be a summer dresses email and the products that they're showing are completely unrelated. And it does look really weird. Yeah, sure, it drives more revenue, but relative to those other examples that I brought up from a branding perspective, it is not great looking. So I've seen some really great implementations as well as some not so great.
Yeah, it is amazing how different a little bit of work can go a very, very long way, a little bit of extra time, and then how different a recommendation can be. Ibby is a very humble person, and so is never going to plug himself or his company on this podcast. But I have done comparisons of the revenue from his recommendations compared to other platforms' default things like a Klaviyo recommendation or a Shopify recommendation, and his outperform by like orders of magnitude. And so it is something like, it's still better to recommend something using a default thing than to not have recommendations. However, all recommendation engines are not created equal.
The incremental revenue opportunity is miles ahead using something that's truly curated and personalized.
Yeah. I think that personalization and the fact that I just see so many brands, I don't think it's anyone's fault, right? I think a lot of this is because teams are getting leaner every single day. There's less and less money to invest in this kind of stuff. Margins are shrinking. But what I've seen lots of brands kind of miss the mark on is just doing any sort of personalization at all. And I think what ends up happening is we had somebody come on the podcast it was either last week or the week before, talking about sort of like phantom unsubscribes, where it's, you send 3 or 4 emails, somebody will buy from you, you'll send them 3 or 4 emails, they're not relevant at all to the customer, and then they'll just stop opening them, right? It's like, oh, like, sure, it's come up in my Gmail inbox, I see that there's a message from brand X or brand Y that I've bought from before, but because I'm not going to even open it to click unsubscribe because I just don't notice it anymore, right? Like that personalization, right at the beginning of the customer journey is just so important. And I think it's difficult to do. I think it takes a lot of effort. And I'm kind of curious, how do you kind of weigh the costs and benefits of kind of implementing that?
Yeah.
With all the other things that you have to do when you're running kind of a marketing team.
Well, you spoke to some of what's actually very difficult about learning a customer for the first time, which is, you haven't gotten very many signals from them. You just have their email address. Maybe they've looked at 3 products. Maybe they've made a purchase, in which case, definitely to your point, you should be able to personalize some of the customer journey. But what brands do struggle with, and I don't have the exact right answer. Of course, we can start to thread it together through how many times have they visited the site? How many times have they opened the app? What are they looking at? But until you start to get a little bit more mature insights about what they're interacting with and what their preferences are, it's really hard to design any sort of buyer flow that accommodates, their preferences. So it can read, and it often does as a consumer. I'm sure everybody's experienced this, that you just go into a basic welcome flow, you get introduced to the brand, you get the generic overview. And there's not a ton that brands can do to change that unless there's strong signals, like a purchase or something like that. Or they have crazy data teams that are able to really stitch that together from the very first interactions with the website, which is very hard to do. So I think in general, some of those in-platform options, such as bestsellers, and then changing your recommendations as they move through the funnel, as you get to know them a little bit more and get more signals, is important. So you have more generic top of funnel, and then as you get to know them, you're really personalizing and you're actually speaking to them about what products they want. But I do continue to be challenged with that, Ibby, and the phantom unsubscribes. And I call them like also the one and done shoppers who make one purchase and then they never come back again. And you just kind of never learn more about them. It's really challenging for a lot of brands.
Is there anything you do to try and, or that people can do to try and extend personalization beyond just the email? And like you said, that you might also like block on a PDP or something like that. Are there easy, or I guess also super complex ways that you can personalize, the homepage of a site or recommendations on collections or anything like that?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, you can, one thing I've seen brands do who really care about learning those signals from customers is introducing data captures opportunities throughout their experience. So things like little surveys, quizzes, follow up, like any sort of insights that you can gather throughout their journey, especially through onboarding. I'm not a fan of an overly complex onboarding flow, but there are some basic insights that you could gather, especially if you're a brand that sells male and female, and you just need to know, like, yeah, there are gender categorizations, but what are they actually interested in? And some of those things on the upfront can be really helpful. So I've seen that threaded throughout the entire experience, throughout all their digital touch points. The other aspect that I think, it's more of a black box, but we all know that Meta and Instagram and TikTok, they all have algorithms that do a really good job personalizing to the users. And there's, in terms of advertising and retargeting, but there's also some ways that brands can manipulate it with very specific retargeting opportunities to those users to kind of showcase them some of the product categories that they've shopped prior or may be interested in. You just have to be very careful because I always take the idea that, like, we want to be not the creepy brand that follows the consumer around and shows them exactly what they're shopping. We should offer them some sort of additional benefit by what we're showing them that's truly gathering those products that we really do want to see but are buried and showing them to us at the right time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can't remember who, I think it was one of the earlier podcast episodes, but it also could have just been a job interview I was doing with somebody. I can't remember at this point. But I remember someone said the perfect example of personalization is Spotify. And they said, I would give them every bit of data about me that they ask for because it makes my listening experience better. And so they had no problem sharing data because it benefits them. And like you're saying, there's other ways where brands will just be like, hey, remember you looked at this product one time. Remember you looked at this product one time. And it's like, that doesn't help me at all. Like, I didn't buy it. Do you remember that? So I guess, like, how do you kind of balance those two of, like, telling a story, building brand affinity, trying to deliver value rather than just pushing a sale all the time? And how much do you leverage, like, brand building moments versus, showcasing ads and emails that are just about the product they viewed or added to cart but didn't buy?
That's really a story about, it's not just about incremental revenue. It's really about lifetime value and true benefit of this relationship with the customer. And I'm all about the longevity of a customer relationship with a brand. I believe really, really strongly in brand building as well, and the actual value, like you just described, of the Spotify. And people will willingly open up all of that data to any brand that is truly curating an experience for them that's adding value. And some brand business models, I think, just work better with that, like the Spotify business model, where the consumer is frequently interacting with a lot of content and they want curated content. Another one might be like a subscription business model where you're in it for the long haul. Any business model with a subscription, the intention is to grow and learn with the brand, and whether that's buying product through a subscription or maybe it's that more content focused one. But I think just interactions throughout the app and the web experience that I've seen are simple, easy, and you just have them threaded throughout as like a thumbs up or a heart, simple actions that the user can take, not this long survey that pops up that is going to put them through a 30-step series of questions. It's really just threading it throughout and also not interrupting their experience. So you're not like, pop up, here, give me some data. You're attaching it to a card or a product or something like that, where they can just, oh, I see this button to wish list, or I see the button to heart. I'm going to do that. And maybe a tooltip to kind of give you some sense of, we're asking you to heart so that we can curate more products that you might love in your browse experience, but just some simplicity with it.
I love that with the giving the context piece. That reminds me, there was this study I read about one time where they tested at a university. People used to, I don't even know if in college you still have to print things out. That seems crazy that you would have to print out papers nowadays, but you used to have to print out all your papers and hand them in physically to your teacher. And you'd stand in line at the library to print your papers. And so they had people go up and try and cut the line. And there were like 3 samples. There was like people who just like went and tried to do it. There are people who said like, can I cut? I'm almost late for class and this needs to be delivered right now, else I'm gonna fail. And there was people who would say, can I cut, and give a nonsensical reason like, I have lunch in 2 hours. And they found that even if the reason you gave had no logical bearing, people were way more likely to let you cut and do it and not be flustered. And so it almost didn't matter if your reasoning was good or the explanation was good. It's just the very fact that you like had some sort of reason you were presenting for why you deserve special treatment. And so I wonder if that's similar to like, why, just giving a little bit of context about why it'll help to answer a survey or to tell us your size is right now so we can have recommendations of things that are in stock. Something as simple as that, where now you're getting a little bit of data. You can have the default size set or default color or whatever on all these products.
Now, on the flip side, I know it's so focused on simplicity. I'm also a big fan of a monthly survey that is longer to your customers, as long as you cushion it. Like you said, there's a lot of psychology behind this for sure. There's like white papers galore and things like, we're asking you to fill this out to improve not only your customer experience, but others' experience with the brand. And also, kind of tying that to, you're helping the greater good by providing this information to us. And I've conducted customer interviews where they're unpaid. They're taking an hour out of their time, out of their day, to actually sit on a Zoom call with me after providing, we did a customer survey on an ongoing cadence and then asked them with a little checkbox, just a Survey Monkey. There's tons of different survey tools that can help support this, but a little checkbox at the end saying, would you be interested in connecting with us so we could learn more about your experience with the brand? And then we did that, conducted some interviews, and then kind of compiled insights. And it informed everything from the operations of the business to, of course, the web and email and all the marketing experiences that we were intending to learn about. But it was way more powerful and became sound bites for us to reference ongoing for informing our entire customer experience.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the most important part of that is that you used it to make decisions and actually applied those learnings, right? Like, I think the most frustrating thing is taking a survey or doing something and feeling like there's no impact, nothing changes. Like, if you're going to capture data, if you're going to make people take time to do something, you need to have there be like tangible proof that you're doing something good with it. We're talking about making data actionable and being able to personalize effectively. How can you get more insights on new customers, new visitors, new users?
I think simplicity is key, and threading it throughout the online or app user experience is really impactful, but in a way that makes it easy for the user to actually contribute that data, and they don't have something popping up and interrupting their experience, but it's attached to a content card, a simple heart that you can press, or a wish list item on a product page that maybe even has like a tooltip pop up for you to get some understanding that we're asking you to provide these insights so that we can better improve your experience, and really informing them about why you're asking for this data to improve the broader customer experience or improve it for other customers. But shedding that light in association with that request is really important.
Rachel, so now we've got all this data. It's on one place. It's all in a data warehouse. How can we actually start to make money off of it? Where are some places we can send the data to?
My favorite channels to action off of with a unified customer view are SMS, really powerful these days in relation to email, but those retention-focused channels, email, SMS, email, I'd say the product grids, the unique timing of follow-ups, so triggering like life cycle emails at the right time, showcasing the relevant products within them, especially if they've made a recent purchase, maybe some post-purchase follow-ups for products that may go with the products they purchased before. Of course, paid ads as well, curating a targeted list for that represents your best customers that you could actually seed for lookalike audiences and start gathering new brand awareness with new customers that look a lot alike the customers that you have determined are your best. And then, of course, retargeting with products that they may purchase.
Rachel, if people want to work with you, to learn more from you, to get in touch with you and the team, where should they find you? And is there anything in particular you want people to know?
Yeah, I'd love to help brands scale their e-commerce businesses, help with retention and growth channel strategy, as well as whole D2C strategy. You could find myself or my business partners and the whole collective at rexcollective.com, but you could also feel free to shoot me a note directly at rachel@rexcollective.com.
Perfect.